right from the top and guided by the Prime Minister's office, there is a new informal thought process saying that if an Indian product is there out there, even if it is a little more expensive, let's go for the guys who are making it in India. And that's a big mindset change.
There was a sudden shift in, say, bringing private players on board when Atmanirbhar happened.
The involvement of private players has not started now. What has changed now is the fact that the government is insisting that the intellectual property remains in India. It's no longer worried only about the manufacturing part. The government has realized that unless we build it ground up, we are forever going to be dependent on another country for our core technology.
What do you make?
We have three major areas that we focus on. We focus on electronic warfare, where we make anti-drone systems. The anti-drone systems have been bought by the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force. They have now been exported to Kenya.
How tough is the competition with China in Africa?
China is there in all the places. What China has been doing for the last few years, people have realized that the Chinese gifts come with strings attached. And that is one of the reasons that India is considered as a far more neutral and a more better partner by a lot of people around the world.
India is still the largest importer of arms, right?
It's not that we want to be 100% Indian. That's not the point. The point is that can we reduce our foreign dependencies to a vendor status? Can the intellectual property remain in India? If, for example, US doesn't supply a part, can I get it from France? If France doesn't supply it, can I get it from Germany? As long as it's parts that we are getting it from, components getting it from, no harm, no foul.
Namaste, Jai Hind. You're watching or listening to another edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. Today's discussion is about IDEX, which is being termed as a game changer in the Indian defence setup. Let's get to understanding how the defence innovation space operates in India. With me is Dr. R. Shivaraman, co-founder Big Bang Boom Solutions. Dr. Shiva and his partner, his childhood friend, began from a room in his home. BBBS, anti-drone defense system, the Vajra Sentinels, is state-of-the-art system designed to detect, track and neutralize drones at extraordinary range. Its sensors and jammers meet military standard specifications for durability and reliability. Many of the young entrepreneurs working in the defense startup ecosystem think big and hope big. Their vision is ambitious. My colleague Ajit Dubey joins me in this conversation. Thank you, Dr. Shiva, for coming on the podcast. You have to break down things into real simple stuff for me and for some of our audiences. So I will interrupt you if I don't understand something, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Thanks for coming. I want to start with the budget. The government has allocated 6.8 lakh crores for defense. That's a 9% increase from last year. And around 14,000 crores has been set aside for R&D, research and development. Should India be happy, or should India invest more in defense R&D? As somebody who's a practitioner of that, can you tell me about that?
Sure. I think the budget is interesting. What we'd have loved to see more on the budget would be specific allocations. Primarily, if you see the innovation aspect of the defense budget, it would be the IDEX, the TDF programs. We'd got a lot of mentions in the previous budget and the allocation. So in terms of the R&D spend in defense, there's not really much in the budget right now. Okay. While yes, there is a increase in the defense budget allocation, and that's good for the ecosystem at large. But coming back to your point on the 14,000 crore that's been allocated for R&D, this is a spend over the next 5 years. So if you look at it, an annual allocation of 3,000 crores, while it is a very, very encouraging number, is still too small compared to the ambitions of the country. Country like India, where we are geopolitically, tumultuous region, and the fact that the industry is just starting off, I think we would require at least 5x of the number for it to really make sense to a lot of us.
The Ministry of Defence has signed a big deal, a big contract with your company. It's a 200 crore rupee deal for anti-drone systems. This is the largest deal under IDEX. For viewers and listeners, here's a short explainer of what is IDEX. IDEX stands for Innovations of Defence Excellence. It's a scheme by the Ministry of Defence of India that supports innovation and technology development in the defence and aerospace sectors. Is this a big shift in the defence ecosystem in India? I mean, and the private defence ecosystem?
IDEX is a program under the Ministry of Defense where the Army, Navy, Air Force, the forces actually put out challenges, problem statements or technologies that they want to see developed in India. And it is open to everybody, MSMEs, startups, innovators, individuals, anybody can apply to it. And then you go through a screening process, and then if an HPSC, a high power steering committee, shortlists you, then you get what is known as an IDEX grant. The IDEX grant basically gives you access to a lot of interesting or important facets of the military ecosystem, along with the financial assistance that's required to carry out a project.
Just want to ask you, Dr. Shiva, like a lot of budget, a lot of the capital allocation, I think last year it was close to 70% or even more, is spent on acquisition from indigenous industry or the Indian industry. Are you happy with that situation? Is it helping helping companies like yours?
Absolutely, yes. This is one of the things that we keep talking about in every forum that we are a part of, that the only real way to drive innovation is to ensure that a lot more of orders are flowing into the ecosystem, and that is the only real way for you to get anything. The grants help a lot. Like when we talk about IDEX, I always tell people that the greatest advantage of the IDEX program is the fact that it gives you a clear problem statement. The user tells you exactly what he or she needs. The second biggest advantage is the access to the community. You get a nodal officer who works with you on the product development. You get access to the testing facilities, the infrastructure.
You mean nodal officer, like suppose you're working on an army project, you get an army officer to work with you, help you develop your product.
Absolutely.
Just like we have been seeing in Iron Man and other movies, like they have their...
They have a liaison.
LOs embedded with the companies. Okay, so that has started happening.
That has started happening, and that is the biggest advantage. The grant that comes out, the money that's there as a part of the IDEX program is actually 1.5 crores. If it's an Aditi project, it's 25 crores.
What's Aditi project?
So Aditi is the latest version of IDEX programs, where the challenge winner gets up to 25 crores in grants. So it's a much larger. So after getting the initial feedback from the innovator saying that 1.5 crores is not enough to build fantastic technology, it's good to build, let's say, small systems, the government has launched a new program called IDEX Aditi, where it allows for up to projects up to an outlay of 50 crores, where 25 crores comes in from the government.
So how did you hear about this? I mean, you are a techie guy, right? How did you and your partner decide that this is the sector that you want to move into? You're not a businessman who got into it. You're not building cars and decide, okay, I want to get into defense. You're not somebody who's in petrochemicals and decides, I want to get into defense. Tell me, how did you think about this? How did your business come about?
And also tell us about yourself, like education, background, all those things.
Sure. So I've done a bachelor's in computer science. As a part of the bachelor's, I got a chance to spend around 6 months to a year at Carnegie Mellon, where I learned a lot about R&D and how really research can happen, no matter which what field of education that you're a part of. Coming back, I did my master's and PhD in India. So I was one of the guys who did a part of the bachelor's there, but decided to do a master's PhD here.
Where?
At SRM University in Chennai.
Okay.
And then I went to do a postdoc in University of Western Australia. Post which I started my first company. My first company was in EdTech. We used to work with universities on doing R&D and setting up research infrastructure. But one of the biggest problems of that business was that no products were realized. The universities were very happy publishing papers, and it used to stop there. So when I was able to sell the company, and that company went through an IPO, it made a lot of logical sense for us to get into product development, the one thing that we couldn't do in the part of that business. And to us, defense were a very strategic field because one, India was just opening up. We realized that there was not a lot of innovation happening in defense.
What time frame are we
This
talking?
was 2018. Okay. So India was just transitioning from the Make in India phase. So the government had launched the Make in India, which is mostly focused on manufacturing, saying that it doesn't matter where the product is coming from, but you make it in India, right? And then the government was slowly getting into the place where it said, no, Make in India is not enough. Let's start focusing on Atmanirbharta or self-reliance, for which the intellectual property needs to be in India. So to us, it made a lot of sense. We were very good at R&D. We were good at developing products in a very frugal manner. And defense was obviously the hotbed of technology. It also helped that Dr. Ajay Kumar, the ex-defense secretary, who was at that point of time the Secretary of Defense Production, reached out to me on Twitter, pinging saying, you know what, Shiva, the stuff you're talking about is exciting. Why don't you work with us at MOD? And I think that's fantastic. That kind of an outreach from a secretary level officer.
This was in
This was in 2018.
How old were you at that time?
I was 34.
Huh. And so he just like randomly found somebody on Twitter putting out some interesting information out there, and he just made the cold call to you.
So this
and,
was
and that's not how defense ministry is
Yeah,
known for
I
functioning.
would think.
So this was when we were posting about a project that we were doing in Korea. We had collaborated with another startup in Korea. We had no idea how to work in India. So we were doing some work in Korea and
In
things were
defense.
going on in defense. And then one of the posts about that, and then he replies on the post saying that, you know what, why don't you work with us? And we met him. He told us the IDEX program is getting launched. And since then, we've been very bullish. We've won 5-6 challenges now. We've completed 3 of them. We are among the early adopters of the platform.
Okay, so what do you make?
So we have 3 major areas that we focus on. We focus on electronic warfare, where we make anti-drone systems. The anti-drone systems have been bought by the Indian Army, the Indian Air Force. They have now been exported to Kenya. We were the first IDEX company to export any product out of the country. So we got our export license a couple of weeks back. We sent that out. We also make
So this
cybersecurity.
Kenya order came, you sent export, did that export about 3 weeks back.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, 2-3 weeks back.
Huh.
So we also make cybersecurity toolkits. So basically anything to do with electromagnetic spectrum monitoring, your helping the intelligence agencies, etc. Then we have a division on AI, where we work on decision support system. Anything that can make decision making easier for the end user. This includes situational awareness tools, AI to maintain large legacy platforms, etc. And we have a niche division in nanotech, which works on polymer and inorganic chemistry, basically material science things that can again have a contribution to the end user.
Since we're talking about these defense products, I have this question for you that since the Russia-Ukraine war, in your opinion, how has the battlefield changed? Like for use of, say, large hardware like tanks to small ones like drones?
Like impression of a war was that tanks are firing, missiles are going from here to there, and now it is just we are seeing small drones chasing individual soldiers, attacking,
Buildings,
killing
Russia.
buildings. Yeah.
Yeah, the attack in Russia was...
I think what the Russia or the Russo-Ukraine war has really taught us is that it's not about big or small equipment per se. It's about asymmetric warfare. It is about how can technology allow you to take cheaper equipment that are more advanced in technology and take out larger systems that are there. So there have been these extremely small drones that have been able to take out large radar systems. And now the question is not which has more advanced technology or which is bigger, but the question is how much are you literally bleeding your opponent? How long can they continue funding the war? And that's become the question. And that's the same case that's happening in Israel also. You're seeing a lot of asymmetric tech that's being put out on the battlefield. And I think that's going to be the future, where there is going to be a mixture of cyber and electronic warfare as part of future engagements. And the focus is going to be on how do we spend very little money causing maximum damage as possible to whoever your adversary is.
So as a defense producer, you have to be agile in watching what's happening and altering your products for the need, right?
Absolutely. We need to keep pivoting.
Okay.
And Dr. Shiva, like you're talking about how warfare is changing, asymmetry has come into that. Look, like how do you, like you've been dealing with the Indian Defence Forces. How do you see the mindset or the thinking of the Indian Defence Forces getting changed? Like till some time back, the focus was on larger systems. Like we see ourselves buying American Predator drones or transport aircraft, or we are looking for fighter aircraft. So has that mindset changed? Are we looking to have these kind of smaller and more potent weapons?
Absolutely. I think...
And if you can give some examples.
Sure. Actually, it's the mindset change is happening across the entire armed forces. And you can see that very clearly right now. So if you see, the army has become a lot more open in interacting with startups. and engaging with them on various fronts, not only through the IDEX program, even independently. If you take the divisions of the army, such as the Army Design Bureau, the Navy's TDAC, or the DAD agency of the Air Force, all the indigenization agencies have become a lot more aggressive, and they have been funded a lot more today compared to any time in the past.
Funded by government or private investors too?
No, these are all divisions of the army. So
These are all
they
the
get a lot more prominence. So the Army Design Bureau, which was like maybe a 4-people organization, today has an ADG that's heading it. The reports directly go into the Chief of Army Staff, etc.
Okay.
So they become a lot more powerful organization. And the critical part of that, and two major things that I'd like to highlight here, is one, they have started doing these forward area tours or immersion tours for the startups and the companies, and that's very, very important. And in fact, a lot of our products have come through that only. So they allow for the private agencies and public agencies, whoever it is, they allow them to go live in the army bases for extended periods of time, 5 days, 6 days, 8 days, go to the borders, go to the, let's say, the maintenance workshops, the BRD depots, and then figure out what are the problems these guys are facing, what are the ground realities. And so that allows us to ensure that our products that we are building are tailor-made and are perfect for what is actually required. So that prevents startups or innovators from working in silos. The second thing, and this is again a big mindset change, is that right from the top, and probably and guided by the Prime Minister's office, there is a new informal thought process saying that if an Indian product is there out there, even if it is, let's say, 60%, 70%, 80% of what is available around the world, even if it is a little more expensive, let's go for the guys who are making it in India. And that's a big mindset change, because we have always compared globally and tried to see if we can put impossible demands on the local industry, or preferred foreign vendors because they give you a ready-made product that you can start deploying. There is always a requirement for speed of deployment in the armed forces. But currently, I think the mindset has changed, where they're thinking forward, they're thinking long-term, saying that, okay, unless I buy this product that's maybe a little inferior, these guys are not going to make version 2. Or version 3, and that's important for us in the long term. And I think that is a big strategic mindset change that we are seeing right now, and we are very, very excited about it.
Till about 10 years ago, I think investors were a little wary to invest in defense production, right? Especially private players. Do you see that ecosystem change?
It's changing right now. So like even when we started off, our first investment was very, very tough to attract. So we struggled a lot to get our first investor. In fact, first investor that we got in, we had to de-risk the entire business. Tell him that, what, if we don't succeed in making the product, we'll return the money with interest to you. And we had to give all sorts of guarantees to get the first investor in. Now he's very happy with us, obviously. But things have changed now. Now a lot more people are looking at it aggressively. Big Bang Boom, we have managed to raise money at least 3-4 times now, and quite aggressive valuation. So we are looking at it. But one of the things that we are very careful about as a company is that we have realized that defense is going to be a long game. So your typical VCs and PEs are not the right fit for it, because they look at, let's say, 2 years or a 3 years horizon to get into an IPO and try and see if the company can be listed. And so what we have done as Big Bang Boom is that we have broken down the problem and said, the investor is looking at an exit within 3 to 5 years time. Now defense is a long-term business. It's a 10-year, 15-year kind of a business. So instead of trying to see, so initially in the early phases, we used to try and see if we can get investors who had a long wait period. This is called patient capital. But then what we realized is, rather than do that, let's churn our cap table out. So what we did in our current round, we raised around 250 crores. We used the money to pay back our initial investors. So they are happy, they have exited. The new guys who are coming in are willing to wait another 5 years with us, right? So we started defining ourselves as a dragon, saying that, unicorn is not a status that I'm interested in becoming. I don't want to have a high valuation. I want to be able to return money to my investor. So if my 6th investor comes in, I'll use half of his money to return my first investor out. So the guy has made money, he's walked out, he's very happy with us. Then we'll keep raising money and keep paying back investors, so that not only are we able to think long term, but our investors are making money. And this is important because a company like Big Bang Boom, 5-6 years since our start, we are now profitable. And we are in a position where we can say, let's give money back. Let's not just keep raising money beyond this.
So how much of it do you sell to India, which is obviously only MOD, how much are you selling it to foreign governments, and what are the ethics involved in this?
So, if you look at it, 99% of everything we are doing right now is only with the Indian government. The foreign, as I told you, we've just exported our first product out there, right? But we have conversations with around 14 countries that are there. But we are not so concerned about the ethics of it, because all of the conversations that we are having is facilitated by the MOD only. So most of the international distribution that is done.
So there's that firewall there.
Yes, is through the Department of Defense Production. They have an international cooperation and international cooperation cell. They facilitate all our conversations, and that's what makes it, it's impossible for a startup like mine to go to so many countries and be able to reach the right people. So we work through the government, and the government has checks and balances in place to protect, safeguard their interest. But this is again being done strategically to ensure that the defense deficit goes down. So India will manufacture more in-house, export more, thereby reducing the deficit that we currently have.
Okay, some basic questions for for people like me who grew up in socialist India. Suppose there's a company, not yours, I'm just talking hypothetically, there's a company making small arms now.
Right.
You and now exports has been opened up. So you export it to a country which is a friend of India. So that firewall done. MOD clears it because you're exporting to a country with whom we have no adversarial relationship. But from there, if it goes further into the hands of a militant group, or if it goes to rebels or whatever, what happens then?
So what India has done is that we have done the same checks and balances that is done by any other country in the world. So what happens is that every time I sell a product, I also have to submit an end user certificate to the government, which is basically a document that says that this is going to be the final end user who's going to be using this product. And that end user also gives a certificate to the government saying that I will not further sell this to anybody else.
So how do you know whether it will end up? Suppose you make
but
a
that
small
end user
arm.
certificate comes from a government
Correct. It has to
of
come
that
from a
country.
government of organization.
So there has to
Now,
be.
There is always a chance that nonetheless the equipment ends up elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then that is an issue between the two governments. So that government has failed its obligation to ensure the security of the product.
So they can become blacklisted then.
They become blacklisted to receive further things. And this has also helped in the way that India has opened up defense lines of credits with a lot of these governments.
Okay.
And a lot of the products are also facilitated through the defense LOC. So now if you breach the covenants of that, then that letter of credit gets invalid. So the entire financial sanctions that come into play will also come into it.
Also,
That
I
is how
think
the country
all
protects
the other countries will also be wary of doing business with those
Correct.
countries.
So once
right?
you breach a end user certificate, that country's credibility in the international market goes lower. So for them to be able to access aid, to access such technology will become tougher in the future.
Dr. Shiva, like you have been talking to 14 countries, you've already been successful in exporting to Kenya. Like, can you tell us what is the role played by the defense attaches and embassies in in foreign countries? Now they have also become proactive. Can you tell us your experience?
Absolutely. So most of the embassies around the world now have a DA who's a serving officer from one of the three forces that are there. And the DA does multiple things. One, they facilitate our conversations with the respective governments by setting up these defense seminars. So the defense seminars are organized. In fact, most of our business development currently happens through the seminar, where we are able to fly in there, we are able to give a presentation to all the armed forces of the respective countries. The DA also plays an advisory role, where he engages with the chief of staff and the president of the respective country and advises them on how to face their threats using technology and what would be the right source of technology in India for a requirement like that. And the third thing the DA also does is that they facilitate this entire export documentation that's required, like getting the end user certificate, ensuring that the legal permission is available. So all of these the nitty-gritties that are there, given that the DA is a serving officer, he understands the military ecosystem and he is able to talk languages on both sides, allowing us to be able to do it. In fact, this would be a very, very tough business to do without the DAs involved.
And like earlier our focus, like we have now just in last few years we have decided that we'll also try to expand our exports. the focus in recent times has been Africa. As a company, Big Bang Boom, do you think, how do you see this focus on Africa, and are you also trying to explore the markets in already developed country parts of the world like Europe, US, Australia, Southeast Asia? Like, have you tried to focus there also?
Absolutely. So we see Africa is very, very attractive, primarily because the African countries are now hungry on growth, technology. Africa is currently in a place where India was in 1990s. Right? It's a country. The entire ecosystem is opening up. People are aspirational and they want to see what is it that is there out there. So it's a brilliant place to do business right now. Things are moving very, very fast, and they are also getting a lot more international. So there is a sanctity to agreements and people are a lot more reasonable when it comes to it. So Africa is definitely a very interesting market for us, but we are also focusing on the MENA region, Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, which has opened up for us. And Eastern Europe is again a big place, the Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, your entire region where the ex-USSR countries that are now starting to lean more towards either Asia or towards the West as the things are progressing. Despite that, for us, the developed nations are also something that we are interested in. We are actually hoping that our first export to the UK will happen sometime this year. But here we are looking at more of technology partnerships. We are looking at design and development being done together, etc., rather than looking at them as a pure direct sales approach, primarily because of the NATO regulations, etc., which is a very expensive affair. We have not really got our hands dirty with it, but I think that is there in our 3 to 5 year kind of a plan.
Does it work? You're a small company, you're an entrepreneur. How do you compete against a Dassault or a Lockheed Martin? They have huge budgets for advertising, for government liaison in all these countries, in whether it's in Europe, Southeast Asia, even Africa they would have. How do you compete with them?
So in Europe, as I told you, we don't compete with them. We don't try to compete because they've got the licenses, they've got the muscle there to completely outweigh us completely. But when you come to countries like Southeast Asia and Africa, I think it is not, the influence is not so extraordinary, primarily because of the pricing factor. Like typically, if you look at it, Africa, Southeast Asia is still a price sensitive market. At least the MENA region is not so price sensitive. But even they are now looking at saying that, okay, you know what, if I'm buying a particular technology, is there a equivalent cheaper alternative that is available? Now, one of the biggest role that has been played in driving the fact that the Western countries are charge a very, very high price for their IP has also been the emergence of Israel and China and Korea as technology alternatives. And now, once they have proved that there are technology alternatives, people are looking towards India also as a viable source of an alternative technology. So if there is a geopolitical tension with a particular country, India is usually a neutral country except for, let's say, 3-4 other people who don't like us around the world.
How tough is the competition with China in Africa?
It is quite tough. It's quite tough. China is there. China is there in all the places. But sometimes people, given China, what China has been doing for the last few years and what they have done, let's say with Sri Lanka and let's say with Pakistan, etc., people have realized that the Chinese gifts come with strings attached, and that is one of the reasons. That's what I was trying to put it up a little more subtly, saying that India is considered as a far more neutral and a more better partner by a lot of people around the world.
And do you see India as a good partner in the sense that with IDEX, do you see that there was a sudden shift in, bringing private players on board when Atmanirbhar happened, or is it gradual?
It was absolutely gradual. The Indian government actually tried a lot of things. Like the involvement of private players has not started now. It has been started since the time, let's say, L&Ts, Tatas of the world were opened up into the defense. But what has changed now is the fact that the government is insisting that the intellectual property remains in India. It is no longer worried only about the manufacturing part. So I think this has been a gradual shift where they have realized, like for example, Sukhoi was a fantastic aircraft that we got in. HAL got a technology transfer for it. It took us 20 years to sort of absorb the technology. And by the time HAL has the capacity to build Sukhois independently, the entire technology is outdated. So then again we are going out to buy Rafale. The government has realized that this TOT scheme doesn't work, and unless we build it ground up, we are forever going to be dependent on another country for our core technologies. And this is I still think we are still taking baby steps, but this is the best way and the first step forward.
But India is still the largest importer of arms, right?
We'll
When
be in
did
the
that
top three.
status change? What do you see? Like a time frame. Give me a time frame to understand the number of players who are there from ground level, from R&D level to the final product level. Is there like such a mushrooming of companies that we will not be a net importer for long?
So I don't think being a net non-importer, I don't think is realizable in the next maybe let's say 15 years or so. But I think by 2030 we should drop off the list of the top 10 net importers of the country world, and I think that's a fantastic place to be in. See, it's a globalized ecosystem. There's no doubt. Like for example, a lot of these aircrafts cannot be built without parts from India. Okay, so I don't think the worry is so much as to whether we are a net. Let's say we don't want to be in the top 3, we don't want to be in the top 5, probably not in the top 10. It's not that we want to be 100% Indian. That's not the point. The point is that can we reduce our foreign dependencies to a vendor status? Can the intellectual property remain in India? If, for example, US doesn't supply a part, can I get it from France? If France doesn't supply it, can I get it from Germany? As long as it's parts that we are getting it from, components getting it from, no harm, no foul. You can get it from anybody you want. An Apple iPhone is not a US product. It's not made in US at all. There's literally, if you take it in terms of components, the US component will be nothing. But the intellectual property belongs to US. US decides whether the phone switches on or switches off. And that is what is key. As long as we are able to ensure that, I think India would have achieved its dream.
Okay. You mentioned AI. Is the AI related to defense systems that you're working on?
Yes.
Okay. So explain to me that how is that impacting? And the reason I'm asking is because I find this whole DeepSeek thing very interesting. So what's going to happen? I'm just wondering, I mean, if, Mr. Altman has a problem with DeepSeek and if the others are looking and wondering if all the information, all the keys, everything goes to China, all the information goes to China, that becomes a problem for many countries. But then it was a problem if it was going to the US also. So where do you stand? How do you do that? Should I download DeepSeek or not? Should I use it or not? Does it matter to me whether what I am searching goes to the US, goes to China? I'm presuming everything that I search goes to all countries. It doesn't matter. I don't know where they are sitting. So explain to me this whole thing. And what happens if somebody sitting in India, maybe you, takes the technology from DeepSeek and makes an India product, which is similar. I'm hoping somebody does it.
So what we do in AI is something similar. So we do have, we do try and see if we can make decision making easier. So we analyze the data from various sensors, various systems that are there on defense platforms, and then provide a consolidated input to the decision maker on it. That's what basically we do. We have 4-5 projects that's going on now, quite interesting. But coming back to your core part of the question, saying that, this entire hangama about DeepSeek, etc. I think AI right now is going through the transitional phase, and people are realizing that it can be used for a lot of things. And it was only a matter of time before somebody came out with a cheaper product. It was just like how Ford came out with a fantastic car priced at $500 when people were selling it at $2,000, $2,500. This is like democratization of the technology, and it's bound to happen. If China didn't do it, somebody else would have done it for sure, right? OpenAI or Altman, the US companies that were working on this thing, have invested a lot of money into the technology, no doubt about it. They were hoping that whatever they have built, they would give them a head start and a moat around their technology for a lot longer. They were projecting that for the next 10 years, 15 years, they will be the only suppliers.
You remember that press conference when he came to India and somebody asked him the question
that
can India do it? And he said,
yeah. So
don't
I think,
even try, not keep trying.
Don't even try.
Don't even bother. So they try to create the story saying that, this is impossible to create technology, and I think DeepSeek has basically pulled the rug from under their feet. I think that's what has happened. I think will India come up with its own foundational model? I think again it's only a matter of time. But again, it depends on whether people are putting into it. I know a few companies that are working on it. It's called foundational model. We don't do it. We don't do foundational. At this point of time, we don't do it. We use open source foundational models to build on top of it to get the application of it ready. But there are companies that are working on creating foundational models specifically for the Indian ecosystem. Coming back to the data security, and that's a big concern, right? I mean, it's not that the US based companies are any this thing. We've had enough cases of Facebook data being skimmed and being available. There was a huge issue back in the US on how that data was available to analysts very, very easily. So it is not that just because you use a US based company, there is security. The only primary difference is that US still has a very, very strong judicial system, and eventually, if there is wrongdoing, there can be a rebuke or a retribution to it. So people feel safer about it. But frankly, let's say as an Aam Aadmi or a normal citizen, it wouldn't really matter. Okay, but for defense, it makes a huge difference.
Okay.
It makes a huge difference because we've had cases where when components of Chinese have been used in the intelligence part of it, and this is very, very important. When components from China have been used in intelligent parts of it, there have been backdoors that have been plugged into it. So we need to be careful, but we also need to be aware. There is also the extremely aggressive tendency to say, what, we will completely keep China out of anything to do with defense, and that just makes us less competitive. Right? We'll have to understand, we'll have to accept that they are a powerhouse as far as manufacturing is concerned. What we need to ensure again is that keep the intelligence out of it, the chipsets, the cyber layers, that needs to be very, very carefully looked at. If you don't have the capability to look at your product and know whether the backdoor is there or not, then play safe and don't use anything Chinese.
But chipsets, what will you do? What is the option? I mean, other Korea
Korea, Taiwan. Germany, you pay.
You'd still use that rather than use a Chinese one.
If you don't have the capability to know that your product doesn't have a backdoor, if you're not in control of the cyber layer of the product, that's the only way to keep it safe. Because there have been cases of the backdoors being plugged in. The Indian Army has seen it several times. That's the reason we are very, very careful about it. Okay. So if you look at it for defense use cases, I wouldn't touch DeepSeek with a barge pole. But let us say I'm searching for new ways to make my favorite dish. I'll go for the cheaper version.
Okay. It might seem a little silly question, but I just have this to ask you that suppose there's a drone which is a weaponized drone using AI. Can you send a weaponized drone to a conflict area and make sure that when that payload is released, there are no civilians injured? You know that okay, this is a hotel. There's no bomb shelter inside it where there are militants hiding. Can you do that kind? Can you use AI for that, like a robotic technology or whatever it is? Can you do that?
I'll give you an example. So we currently have a project that's going on with the Indian Navy. We are displaying it in Aero India also, where we have built a drone that flies inside a ship. It searches room by room for a thermal signature. And if it's able to identify heat, then it navigates towards the heat, decides whether it's a fire or not, and drops a payload on top of the fire to put it out without any human interaction at all. Now, beyond that, so the drone already has intelligence built into it. It has a thermal camera, 3D LiDAR, and cameras that are attached to it. It has the ability to differentiate between humans, let's say small rats and other organisms that you may face, fire, and whether it's a big fire or a small fire. So it can do this. So can it detect between a civilian and a soldier? Based on clothing, yes. Now what happens if a civilian is dressed in army clothing as a human shield? Now that will require a next level. Now then you start getting into facial recognition, your emotion, you try and see if you can identify whether the person is aggression or not. Can AI do it? I think absolutely yes.
Yeah, and this is something that will be needed in airports and looking at the bomb scares which are happening in schools and things like that. I know for a fact that when my children were in school, there was this fear that there is a bomb scare. Whether it was an exercise or not, that came out only after 24 hours. But evacuation, getting the children out, if you have these kind of drones which can go and see, it would really help law enforcement also, right?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the reasons we are building these things, saying that not only can, so once this AI has been built on top of our drone and we have finished milestone 4, which means the product is ready, we are basically waiting for the final trials with the Indian Navy. Once it's ready, then the model can be adopted to anything that you want. It can search for bombs, it can search for people. Like for example, if there's a hostage situation, the drone can go and scout out how many aggressors are there, what weapons they are carrying. If they are away from the hostages, then drop a grenade on top of them. A lot of the missions that currently are life threatening through our police officers and firefighters, etc., can be outsourced to drones. And I think that's the fantastic thing about AI.
And also, all research is military and then it gets civilian, I guess.
True.
So it will get used in malls, it will get used in railway stations, airports. You see this drone technology going further, right?
Absolutely. See, one of our dreams, and when we started Big Bang Boom, was this concept called the personal safety drone. We were thinking of, if we are able to accelerate the development of this kind of autonomous drone technology. At one day, just like today, we call a cab on demand and we call, let's say, food on demand. We should be able to get security on demand. And if you look at it around the country, most crimes that happen are opportunist crimes. It's not that people premeditate and plan. That's a section that's always there. But a lot of the crimes are opportunistic. So they see an opportunity. They see that, let's say, an house is empty and there seems to be nobody. Most people commit crime because they think they can get away with it. The incidence of crime drop drastically when there are CCTV cameras involved, etc. Not because the cameras are there, because that once you are recorded, you're going to get caught. Now, let us say a woman is feeling unsafe today for some reason. She's had a fight with somebody, has threatened her, or she has a fight with her ex or something of that sort. If she is able to call a drone to monitor her as she walks out of her office, today you're feeling unsafe. The feed can be provided to the local law enforcement, to your brother, to your boyfriend, to your husband. It doesn't really matter. So an autonomous drone can fly in, pick you up from your, as you walk home, can monitor the feed 24/7 and give it back to your loved ones. So security can be provided on demand. If autonomous drone is there, a little bit of AI has been developed, and the air zones or the flight zones are all allowed inside urban environments.
Like, for example, the Kumbh has taken place and there was this ghastly accident which happened.
True.
And there were rumors that it could have been sabotaged by one or two, and all the rumors died down. But the point is, when there's such a large congregation, to have drones going on it continuously, so you're on security camera 24 hours and it doesn't matter whether you're within the vision of a uniformed policeman.
Officer or not.
There is a drone. So once that happens, the sabotage at these kind of large events becomes lesser, right?
Absolutely.
Music concerts. One has heard of terror attacks at music concerts internationally. And anyway, there is this feeling of anxiety when you're going into large crowds, like a cricket match or a football match when there's huge crowd. This kind of drone technology which you are producing can be used there too, right? Soon?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So explain to me what other things that you're doing as far as, use of these military technologies for civilian use can happen.
So one of the technologies that we are building now for the Indian Navy is something that's called a non-lethal naval deterrence technology. So it's a nanotech based polymer that expands when it comes in contact with water to form a gel. The substance also sticks to any metal that it finds. So the use case for this is basically grey water operations where there are boats that are infringing, let's say, on our space, and the Coast Guard or the Navy is monitoring the area. You don't know if the boat is, let's say, a fisherman or a smuggler or somebody, let's say, bringing in a terrorist and dropping it off on our shores.
Like the 2611.
Like the 2611. Today, the Coast Guard and the Navy have no means against the boat, because a boat can never be stopped in open sea. Because the boat keeps moving, there is no way for you to form a blockade. The only thing that the Navy or the Coast Guard can do today is to either fire at them or ram them with their own boats. Both of that leads to international incidents, and both of that can lead to a loss of life, causing a far bigger incident. So there is always a fear in taking any kind of action. And looking at it from a human perspective, even if there's an innocent fisherman, let's say a fisherman from a neighbor country who's fishing, if he sees a Coast Guard, he's going to run. He's not going to wait and see what the Indian Coast Guard or the Sri Lankan Coast Guard is going to speak to him. So what we have come up with is a technology which, when deployed in water, will trap the boat and immobilize the boat, so that the Coast Guard, without use of force, can get in, check if everything is okay. If there's nothing wrong, then the boat is free to go within 30 minutes time. So this is the first use case of a non-lethal naval immobilization system that we have built again under the IDEX program. Milestone 4 trials were recently completed in Chennai. We have actually got a couple of countries, including countries like Israel, who have expressed interest in saying getting access to the technology.
Interesting.
So-
Israel wants to pick up defense technology from India. I like that. Okay. How is this 100% Indian? What you're doing?
This is 100% Indian. This is completely built by us. And we also see a lot of civilian applications. It can be used to guard ports, offshore oil rigs, basically anywhere where maritime security is required, even by civilian, because there is no damage to the boat, there is no damage to the environment, there is no damage anywhere. So this can actually be like a deterrence technology that can be used by literally anybody who wants to safeguard themselves on a naval platform.
Where is your production facility based?
In Chennai.
And why?
We set up our unit there. I think...
Are you from Chennai?
I am from Chennai.
Is that the reason?
No, that is the reason. But Chennai is also has one of the most cost-effective, high-quality R&D talent around the country. So we are very excited to be a part of that.
More
ecosystem.
techies in Chennai as compared to Bangalore?
Not really.
Huh.
But the difference is that the techies in Chennai, one, my personal opinion, I mean, no offense to anybody from Bangalore, but my personal opinion is that the Chennai people look at a lot more stability. Like when we have typically looked at people, if you see, most of my team have been with us for the 5-6 years period, and they'll be with me for the next 10 years. But if you currently see the current trend in Bangalore, people move very, very quickly, and for a business like us, it's very tough. For us, attrition really takes a thing out because we are working on really deep technologies, and for us to change resources is very tough. So we find Chennai to be a much more stabler ecosystem to be in.
Okay. You came back to India after studying abroad. What is it that motivated you to come back here and start a business here? I mean, the attraction is greater to go to Australia, go to America, right? Why didn't you go into the H-1B line?
I think there were two major factors that contributed to it. One was food.
Something as basic as that. I was thinking of a
Something as basic as that. I couldn't get back. I couldn't wait to get back home to our food. And the second was, I think I come from. I think we are millennials. I'm a millennial, so I come from a place where there was a sense of patriotism and a thing saying that doing something for your country is something that you aspire to do, and it sounded like there was enough opportunities in India.
Okay.
And I think, long story short, it's been a fantastic run after coming back.
Lovely. Because I'm hearing a lot in the media, you hear a lot about, people are moving out of India because it's hard to run a business, the red tapeism doesn't get over, and then MOD also has the glorious reputation that from safety pin onwards they will do tender, they will take a long time, nobody wants to buy, they won't give orders. So even though you have the political establishment saying that make in India, banao and all that, but the orders don't come. It takes a long time, and then the vetting process is so complicated. Nobody wants to place large orders. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'm presuming those are the things that still continue.
Those are the things that still continue. But the ecosystem today, the ministry today and this thing today is leaps and bounds better than what it was 5 years back or maybe 15-20 years back. Right. Is it in a place where I have no complaints about it? Absolutely not.
Huh.
Right. I think it can be faster. I think our procurement system is still geared towards imports rather than the indigenous companies. Like the checks, the safeguards that have been put in place are primarily to protect the government against foreign companies, which are not really relevant when the company is based in India. Like you don't need that kind of financial, protections or financial clauses that are there. But the government listens to us. So there are opportunities provided to the companies to speak about it. There is feedback that's been taken. But the current scheme of things, I think, let's say, imagine a startup and let's say like Big Bang Boom, we have done. We have no background in defense. I had no background in defense when I started the company. So imagine a company coming from there having, let's say, 10 projects with the MOD, being recognized as a developer across the Army, Navy and the Air Force. winning orders more than 200 crores, you really cannot say that, the ecosystem is slow. And this has happened over 5 years' time, right? So within 5 years, the government has helped us not only get a project, execute it, finish the testing, get the order, and start delivering on the systems. So I think it's getting better. Can this be done? Like, the government's ambitious thing is that the entire procurement should happen within, I think, 26 weeks. Okay, that's the ambition. Does it happen in 26 weeks? It doesn't happen. It takes a year or so. But a year is not so bad. It's fantastic.
Export licenses, is it difficult to procure? Is it?
We had a very, very hard time. Very hard time. And in fact, at some stage, we had to go and tell the government saying, you know what, sir, we're going to lose this out, because there is competition internationally, and there are companies, like for example, in China, it takes them a week to get export license. So if I and a Chinese company get an order together, they will deliver in a week. For me, with the accelerated procedure, I get the export license in 3 months' time, right? But again, right up to the secretary, like, even the question is one that the industry has a problem, and though the industry problem is not solved immediately, I was able to get access right up to the secretary level. The JS helped us out. The secretary made a few calls. They tried whatever they could. They tried to ensure that what usually takes around 8 months' time was given to us within a 3 months' time. I'm very, very grateful for the government for that. But of course, if this can become a routine rather than an exemption, that would be the dream come true for the country.
Like, I've been covering defense for last 21 years. The attitude has changed a lot. Like, imagine to say 2000.
I remember the
14,
time,
15.
Ajit, jab we would be at at events and all that. If you saw a defense manufacturer, we would like, ये private defense manufacturer है, डर के रहना, कोई middleman तो नहीं है. Because there was such a negative connotation to defense manufacturers and middlemen.
From those days,
you didn't want to be in the same photo frame also.
Like, there was a big businessman who started a shipyard, and this was around 2011-12. He gave invitation for his daughter's marriage to almost everyone in the ministry. And by that time, we had opened up a lot. There were a lot of fund, like budget was going up for defense. And like, people were waiting for the marriage to happen to see who went for the marriage, so they can say and talk about
that
it,
he's on the tape.
gossip about it,
yeah.
that, oh, you know, he so and so went to the marriage.
So private defense manufacturers had that shady background, or they had that reputation, right or wrongly, because of a few bad apples, the others had to bear the brunt of it.
And in India, in the Indian military as well as the defense bureaucracy, it was easier for a foreign vendor to get time and appointment with the ministers and bureaucrats. And like, Indian companies were asked to write mails or and keep following up, and they would get time for, say, after 6 months, 7 months. But in this last 10 years, I have seen people, private manufacturers, youngsters, startups coming to meet senior army officials, Air Force officials at their residences with their presentations on weekends or in spare time. And like, there is no sense of suspicion or doubt that, oh, so and so is taking presentation at home. Like, it's becoming part of the for senior officials at 4-star level or 3-star level, senior people dealing with these companies. It's not a matter of like suspicion that now you called him at your residence for presentation.
It's a government.
It's
a given residence.
Yeah.
When the government has given a residence, that means you're expected to work even from home. There is no outside time.
Yeah.
When you're living in a government given house, वो भी तुम्हारा workspace बन जाता है.
And
that's what
like,
the way I see. I grew up in a government house, so there was no off time. If you understand what I'm trying to say, that even at home, it was a roof provided
by the government,
which means that you are 24 hours. You are a government servant. You don't take it off.
And ma'am, like Dr. Shiva would also would have experienced this. Like, earlier, all the senior defense people, military officers would visit a PSU or a shipyard, government shipyard during their field trips. But now the number of trips to private companies is much more than to PSUs.
Absolutely. I think that's
There is a
absolutely
trust
true.
factor.
In fact, when I started the company itself, the first time, as I was just mentioning about Dr. Ajay Kumar, the first time he told Vaishava, why don't you come and meet us? His, I think it was his OSD or maybe somebody in his office, they refused to give us appointment a couple of times. We asked, appointment was being refused. We asked appointment. In fact, there was a point of time when we approached them and they said, "ठीक है यार, कोई is there any foreigner who's coming along with you?" ठीक है? This was the case even 7 years back, and in fact, I had to ping Dr. Ajay Kumar again on Twitter saying that, sir, I'm not able to get your appointment. After which he apologized. It's all there in public this thing. He apologized and said, you know what, I'll set up the meeting for you. Don't worry. Okay. So what you're saying is absolutely true, sir. That's exactly what used to happen. But things have changed. We've had the vice chief call us and tell us, you know what, I'm coming down to Chennai. I'd like to spend a couple of hours with you. There's absolutely no issues now. Now people are open and okay with talking to industry, and I think that's a big thing, and that's basically is what is making even industry more confident in investing time, effort and money. See, if you take startup founders, they're literally risking their lives. They're putting up their lives and they're hoping something will come out of it. The investors are investing their money, and that's because the industry has changed, because the top down at the secretary level, at the chief's level, at the vice chief's level, at the Raksha Mantri's level, the prime minister levels, the chings have changed and saying that, you know what, we will not worry about that 1%, bad apple that's there. We will focus on the 99% that's trying to do a genuine job, that's trying to build technology for the country. And I think that's all kudos to the current government.
What about lines of credit? Is it smooth getting that? What about foreign investors? I asked you earlier in the program also. For example, if a foreign nation, which has friendly ties with India, if the government of that country wants to invest in you, is that all right? Can you take that kind of investment?
I don't think there's any problem. So I think up to 49% FDI is allowed on automatic route. So, and I don't think there is any difference between whether the money is coming in from a government like a sovereign wealth fund or whether it's coming in from a private investor. We have not taken too much money because one is our government allowing them to invest, but a lot of the VCs etc. around the world have restrictions to invest into the defense space etc.
Okay.
So that's a bridge that's not yet been covered per se. But from the Indian side of things, I think there's not too much of a problem. And that actually allows and actually makes it a lot more comfortable for people to set up joint ventures in India. See, one of the most successful industries in the country today is the automotive sector. And that is a success for the joint venture story, because you had your Maruti Suzuki's, your Hero Hondas that got established in India. And now Hero and Maruti are, giants of their own right. Government is trying to see if they can replicate that. And that is the reason why this 49% is allowed, so that there is an equity holding with the foreign companies in India.
My research team tells me that you met or you at an expo you spoke with Prime Minister Modi and he wanted to know about the nano drone. Can you tell me what that conversation was?
I think that was one of the most interesting conversations that we had. So this was, I think, back in 2022 at Def Expo, where Ahmedabad, where we were on the walkthrough of the Prime Minister, and we wanted to show our anti-drone defense system. This was a system that had been deployed in Gurdaspur. We had monitored drones almost 10 kilometers away, so it was a very, very good system. As a part of the pod, the stall that we had, we also had a small drone that we had built for it. So the Prime Minister comes down and, he listens to our story about the anti-drone. And he says, you know what, can you tell me about that drone that's there? And we tell him, sir, it's a nano drone. It's a very small, so you can hold the entire drone in the palm of your hand. This is primarily meant for counter-insurgency operations. So it can go and it can scope out a place before your alpha team gets in. And I was very, very surprised, because the first question that he asked when he heard that entire thing is ye awaaz kitni karti hai? How much sound does this make? Because the reason it was surprising is that that's not the first time I've shown the drone. I've shown the drone to a lot of people. And most people ask me questions about, what is the endurance? How long will it fly? How good are the cameras? And how fast can it go, etc. It was a lot of merit to the ability of the Prime Minister who leads us to understand that, and if it is a counter-insurgency drone, especially used in this kind of an stealth operation, Your biggest problem is the fact that if it makes a lot of sound, then it's quite useless. If it makes a lot of sound, the enemy knows that they've been scoped out, and there's a scope for it. There's a potential for them to change it around. And the reason I say it is a credit to him is that that was not part of our display. So he couldn't have come prepared. He couldn't have been informed by somebody saying, you know what, this is the question to ask. I can only imagine that he was able to understand the merit of what product we have built and ask a very, very relevant question. And to me, very impressive.
That Yaya Sinwar who was killed with that drone, do you think that that made noise? That's why he threw that stick at it?
It absolutely does. No, if you've been any close to a drone, you'll know that it makes a
That
lot of noise.
sound that comes in.
That'll come. Because of the propellers that are there, a lot of noise is made.
So this anti-drone thing?
You mean the nano
Nano
drone?
drone,
Nano
sorry.
thing. It's quite silent. It's not very silent. It's not where we want it to be. But it's quite effective in what it tries to do.
So the stealth technology, will that be used in the sense that it will be like if drones are used at night, it will not be visible or something like that? Can that happen?
Absolutely. So, see, visibility of drones in night, as long as there's no light, the drones really cannot be picked out at night. So that's not too much of a problem. The two kinds of stealth technologies that people are focusing on is one is reducing the noise signature. Because if you, let's say there's a TB2 that's flying, you can actually hear it from half a kilometer away. And that takes out all the surprise factor
element,
that is associated with it.
But we also need anti-drone, no? Dr. Shiva, in the sense that drones coming in from Pakistan dropping drugs.
Correct.
How do we stop that? Like how it goes, it doesn't get caught by radar. What happens to that? How do you do that?
Oh, well, hopefully you buy my equipment and that takes care of it. We supply those. So what we do is that if you see most of the drones that are there are usually controlled by a remote control. And these are controlled from, let's say, 5-10 kilometers away. So our passive systems, our systems don't emit anything like a radar. It basically detects the communication between the remote control and the drone. Not only do we tell you where the drone is, but we'll tell you what is the make of the drone, the model of the drone, the frequency it's operating in, where the pilot is located, where the drone is located, all the information is provided.
Okay.
So that technology basically allows you, and then once you know where the drone is, then you use a combination of jammers, spoofers, hard kill systems and other technology to be able to take the drone down.
This is the same anti-drone system which the Navy chief had picked up at the...
Yes, the Vajra shot.
Vajra shot. Okay.
Yes.
Explain that. What is this?
So the
It
Vajra
sounds
shot-
very good. Vajra shot.
So the Vajra anciently is described as
As a shield.
both as a indefensible weapon and an indestructible shield. Like it's both a shield and a weapon at the same time. So in fact, if you see Big Bang Boom, our logo also carries a Vajra. So to us, this was a very, very... And if you see anti-drone is exactly that. So the anti-drone is a combination of defensive mechanisms like radars and RF systems that form a shield, and offensive weapons like the laser and the hard kill that actually takes down drones that come in beyond that. So we thought Vajra was a good name for it. The Vajra shot is the miniaturized handheld version of the anti-drone system. That's in the form factor of a gun, so that the end user already knows how to point and shoot. So you simply see a drone that's coming in, you point at it and you press a button and the drone will crash.
Okay.
So that's what is currently most popular. We are selling it in large quantities, right?
Do you have, like when you're working on any kind of technology, do you have an enemy in sight? Like do you think of China? Do you think of Pakistan? Do you think of militants, terrorists? Well, who do you visualize? Obviously you have to visualize, right?
Yes. So what we do is we plan for the ConOps, the concept of operations. We realize what kind of a demographics will this be used in, what kind of environment will be used in, what is the likely target of this particular system, and based on that only the entire system architecture and design happens. Because it's quite varied. See, India is actually a very, very tough country to work in.
Yeah, from the deserts of Rajasthan, you've got to talk about Ladakh and...
Absolutely. The high altitudes of Ladakh, there's absolutely no air there. Extremely low temperatures, inhospitable climates. You have the deserts, you have the plains.
And the
you have
Peninsular India.
Peninsular India, you go east, very, very humid. You want to deploy in this thing, you need to really worry about humidity. You may have a fantastic system that works in the heat, but the system will not handle humidity. So building systems for India is not easy. So unless you really know where these systems are going to be deployed, you will not be able to engineer for them.
Dr. Shiva, lastly, I would like to ask you, like we are talking about Trump wanting India to buy more weapon systems from America. When Macron comes to India, he comes in to push Rafale deal or a submarine deal, and they come with their industry, they come with their people, they come with their teams. Even when we see the Americans, like suppose a Boeing coming to India to sell their F-18, they will come in with the representatives of the US Navy tagged in their team, because they are part of the sales team. Like it's a whole of a nation approach to sell a particular product.
Absolutely.
Do you think, do you foresee like this happening in India also, where our Prime Minister suppose goes to Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, wherever, like to a country, friendly country, and pushing for a deal for a company like say Big Bang Boom or a Solar or...
I absolutely see it happening. In fact, truth be told, it's already happening. Probably the deals are not big enough for the Prime Minister or the Raksha Mantri to get involved. But most of the international seminars I was talking about is usually headed by a joint secretary or a secretary. And the joint secretary or secretary usually engages with the president, prime minister, or a secretary level officer and pushes the product. So they usually get a briefing from us. So usually how these seminars work is that when we go into the country, the DA briefs us on what their requirements are. The secretary actually works with us on mapping that with our products and then having a conversation with his counterpart as to what is it of their interest and facilitating. In fact, several conversations, both in when India exported a large number of equipment, I think, to Armenia, there were secretary level officers who actually sold the deal. So that's happening. Just that once the deal size gets bigger, then I think the Raksha Mantri and the Prime Minister will get involved. There's no point of asking them to come down for $1 million deal or something like that.
But like what Ajit was saying, say if there's Indonesia or Thailand involved, or any of the Southeast Asian countries, is there pressure on those countries to buy from China rather than from India, the ASEAN countries?
Absolutely. So there are two kinds of pressure that's put on them. One is obviously the direct political pressure that's put on them to buy equipment from the country. The second thing is a financial thing. See, China offers a very, very lucrative defense line of credit. Their lines of credit currently is at 2 or 3% interest rates. So for people, it's cheaper and easier to buy from China than to buy from India.
Correct.
Forget putting political pressure. You just make it more viable for them. And that is something that we are currently trying to talk to the government and saying that even at the cost of losing some money, we must be competitive. We must have large lines of credit available to the target markets and at a very, very attractive rate to be able to counter China's influence in the ecosystem.
Dr. Shiva, when you entered the business, there must have been a lot of issues that your company must have faced in terms of getting bank loans or getting access to the ministry or access to tenders. Like how the things have become, can you tell us how things have become easier for for new entrants in the business or those who want to get into the business of defense?
Sure.
And are you as a company trying to do anything about it?
Sure. I think it's gotten easier. I think there are now 2 or 3 VC funds that have come up. The India Discovery Fund based in Mumbai, I think Jamvent Ventures, and I think even Dr. Ajay Kumar has started a new fund. He's advising on a fund that's helping out with defense companies. So it's definitely gotten a lot more easier for defense companies to raise money. And I think the banks are also slowly following the suit. When we got our first order, it was a really tough task for us because as a defense company, we have no assets. The only thing that we have is the IP that we have created. I don't have a large land bank. I don't have money to be able to provide collateral or anything of that sort. So I think for us, the most helpful bank in the country was SBI, particularly the SBI startup branch in Tharmani in Chennai. They were the guys who came out and said, you know what, we will work with whatever you have and we'll support you. And today they are the best bankers for us. Kotak has also been quite proactive. They've also come up with it. But what we are doing as Big Bang Boom is that we realized that the 2 major challenges that we faced was to be able to raise the initial money after getting the first IDEX project and then to be able to continue funding our operations through lines of credit from the bank, etc. So to be able to see if we can solve this ecosystem problem, we have set up a new initiative called the Defense Discovery Division. We are calling it B3D3, Big Bang Boom Defense Division.
Like R2D2.
Like R2D2.
Okay.
Headed by Mr. Praveen, who's my CEO. The idea is that we want to try and see if we can pick up and identify exciting startups that have a great idea, that have support from the government, but if they are struggling with the finance part of it, Big Bang Boom would like to step in and try and see if we can provide everything to them that they require on a platter. So we probably will be putting out the word soon. But the idea is that if there's a company that's exciting, that really wants to make it this thing, whether it is support in the early stages for product development, or if you're finished product development and you want to basically accelerate your production, okay, we are more than happy to step in and provide the support that's required.
Nice. On that note, thank you so much, Dr. Shiva, for sparing the time and coming and speaking to us, and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for watching or listening to this edition of the ANI podcast with Smita Prakash. Do like or subscribe on whichever channel you have seen this or heard this. Namaste. Jai Hind. Click here to watch the previous episodes.